Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
Aaron. My whole body's shaking right now.
What happened?
Do you know my temper?
Eris, I need you to answer me something. Does it make any sense for a 6-foot Wookiee to live on Endor? It makes no sense, Eris.
Well,
Makes no
first
sense.
off, Wookiees are 7 feet, not
7.
6 feet.
My mistake. Because that's what I was thinking when I heard Aaron Hernandez's lawyer, because God bless that guy is good at his job to have got him off for the 2 murders there, because that was a big role of this episode.
Yeah, it was getting him off of that second case.
Get him off that second case. Jose Baez apparently also got Casey Anthony off. I know that was another big story this decade. And he's the new age Johnny Cochran. That's why I just thought of the Chewbacca defense, the ever famous Chewbacca defense. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I wish they kind of would have had a if the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit chant going. They didn't really have like a catchy line or something to.
Well, they did have the Nancy Grace segment from her show where she did alluded to this as the modern day OJ. After watching this series, do you think they're on the same level? I don't think so, for a multitude of reasons, mostly because when OJ had his thing, it had a lot of implications such as racial divide, and I know that this one now has a big story because of the branches woven off of it regarding his sexuality that was built up in this Netflix documentary.
Yeah, no, the OJ trial, there was so much more auxiliary stuff going on. Yes, it was a murder case, but if you've ever watched that 30 for 30, they play more on that white versus black section of that, especially of that time frame. That was right around, the LA riots and everything like that. So, of course, they're going to play off of that. They're going to play off white cops, blah, blah, blah. This one was just more of like he did it, and it was probably because he was gay, but we're not going to fully blame it on that, I guess. But
Netflix did.
Netflix certainly did, but this one wasn't as big. Like, it was still a big case for our generation. This was our OJ case until something else happens with, certain athletes in the lexicon right now. But it was nothing near that. There wasn't as much undertones as that one. And honestly, this Netflix series wasn't as good as the 30 for 30 series.
It had its fallbacks. Now that we've seen all 3 episodes and we can look back on the series as a whole, come on, what we have, like 10 minutes dedicated to CTE? Because we only had like 5 minutes in this episode that I counted. And they did bring up some interesting facts, some stuff I would have loved to learn more about. Like when they showed the pictures of the brain and the atrophy that took place, some legitimate holes in his brain that were in the function that's kind of like control your impulses, control violent behavior. I was like, why didn't I get more of that during the series? Why did I get hyped up on apparently he had a prison lover? And it's just, I felt like there was so many more added nonsense or rumors that had no real legitimate backing that were brought into this documentary, mostly hearsay, whereas I had legitimate scientific evidence that was provided to me that got little to no carry.
Yeah, especially because when he died, there was such a big push to his family from the medical professionals, like, hey, we would love to check out his brain for the CTE. It was such a huge push. I remember it was a huge story whenever they finally released the brain to the medical study. And then in the documentary, they were like, yeah, he smoked weed, he had used Toradol, he was possibly gay or trying to cover up for being gay. Oh yeah, he took a couple headshots in the NFL and his brain looks nothing like what it should be a normal 27-year-old brain look like. But let's just focus on these other things over here that not necessarily hearsay, whereas we have the brain, we have the data, we have a world-class medical researcher that's leading the field in that study for 2 seconds.
2 seconds, yeah, that's all she really got. It was a shame. Looking at it as a whole, the entire show, I thought that was one of the biggest disappointing things. I think that's going to impact my final rating. I thought there was also misdirected blame because they start off this episode talking about the Patriots and talking about, they had like one of their guys set him up with an apartment, get him with a leasing office. It's like, okay, well, that's their job. So if a guy comes up and asks them like, hey, can you look into getting me an apartment? I just need something outside the house. It's like, they're not going to question it. They're not going to think the worst. Because if they knew, again, they would have booted the guy off the team years ago. And Robert Kraft, certainly, like you look him go on into the trial, he thought nothing but the world of Aaron Hernandez, apparently, just thought he was a top-of-the-line guy. In fact, even during the early outbreak of this, welcoming him in his office to talk about the case a little bit. And you could tell Robert Kraft felt legit betrayed when he heard all this go down.
They tried to show like, oh, the NFL tried to cover this up, especially the Patriots. But it's like people don't remember they cut a guy who scored 4 touchdowns for them in the previous game because he showed up 5 minutes late to a meeting. Their culture and everything like that, if they would have known something was going on, they would have cut ties.
Yeah, they cut Antonio Brown after a week.
Yeah, because of the allegation, the sexual allegation or sexual battery or assault allegations that popped up. They were like, yep. Audi. So I'm pretty sure if they had a sniff of this, they would have been like, all right, buddy, you gotta head out.
Yeah, and I'll say for Robert Kraft, all things considered, I know we joke about like his adventures in Miami, but I think it speaks to him as an owner, how he tries to relate to each and every one of his guys. As much as I downplay the sexuality element in it, and I did think that the former offensive lineman's role in it was out of place, I did think it was kind of cool because when he told that story of Robert Kraft reaching out to him, I believed it based off what I know about Robert Kraft's track history. Like, he welcomes anyone that they draft. He brings them in with open arms, and he tries to be their boy, tries to be their like guy, more than just an owner. And I think that's why he's one of the best owners in the league, rubbing Tugs aside. Yeah,
if you listen to like Willie McGinnis on some of the morning shows and stuff like that, or some of the old Teddy Bruschi, one of the cornerbacks is doing media now as well. They all talk very highly of him. And so, of course, you're going to try to show him in a good light. But it was really cool that he reached out to the lineman. I could see why the lineman was in this documentary, trying to show like how hard it was, kind of the mental state it could have put you in trying to hide your sexuality from other people. But I felt like that was too forced. Mm-hmm. The very first episode, I kind of understood why they had the high school boyfriend quarterback guy. Second episode, I started to turn on him. The third episode, I'm just like, all right, this guy's literally just here to get his name out and talk crap or try to show he was a good person. It's just like most of these people in the documentary, outside of Chris Borland, everybody else kind of seemed out of place, except
like
for
his
like
dad.
The actual stuff, like
DJ,
like
the quarterback's dad too. Like, what was he doing in the show after like episode 1?
Yeah.
Altogether, it was a mess on that.
Like they should have been there just to talk about his family and his early life. I really didn't think they should have gotten into the sexuality part of it or anything like that throughout the 3 episodes. I felt like they should have been there more as this is what happened with their dad. Their dad was an outstanding guy. And then bam, this is what happened with their mom. And that's kind of what sent him over the edge. All right, cool. We'll shove him aside. We'll bring in the stuff with the mom. We'll bring in the stuff with the dad. We'll bring in the stuff with the cousin. So I felt like they overstayed their welcome. They were kind of forced in there. That's just how I feel about it.
I mean, another thing that they completely brushed aside, and I felt like this could have even been brought up in an earlier episode, was the fact that he may have potentially been sexually assaulted in his youth. That's one thing that they threw in for about 30 seconds of this last episode.
And they tried to bury it quick, too.
And if anything, if there was any factors that may have led into it, because I have shifted a little bit even since the last episode we did, where I was like, I ranked CTE 1 and then ranked Friends 2, the upbringing 3. I may have kind of like moved CTE a little bit down the list from that one spot because, I think that you look down the line of people that ended up becoming serial killers, a majority of them were sexually assaulted in their youth. Like if you look at like a lot of backstories of a lot of famous serial killers, that is one of those weird ties that seems to be synonymous with a few of them. So I could see that being like one of those things that caused deep mental issues for him in his future growth as a human being. If true. I mean, it's again allegations and they only mention it for a brief second. And then going back to the CTE thing as a whole, why I did shift is I thought that someone did bring up a good statement during it, one of the interviewees. They did mention like, I feel like that's a cop-out and everything. And then it kind of played in my mind, okay, if we're relating this to OJ, what if in 10 years OJ tries to blame all his stuff on CTE? Because he played in a much rougher era in terms of head injuries and contact, right?
Yeah, because they were literally clotheslining dudes, throwing them through the ground. So back in the day, you used to be taught you don't tackle the person to the ground, you tackle them through it. You want to drive them through the ground.
And he was a running back, too.
And he was a running back. Yeah, those guys, you can't lower your head anymore. You can't initiate contact with your helmet. So those dudes were just literally spear diving. Insert the guy from The Simpsons, the meme where he's diving through the window head first. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much how they were tackling people back in the day.
Yeah,
I mean, the OJ thing, I feel like we know enough about that now to where it's, if he tries to say CTE, we could be like, really, bro? Like,
But it's fair. Like, why we can probably like say that I feel like you can justify any poor action now with this as a defense, because CTE did make a lot of money for a lot of people that people don't mention. Yes, it was a horrible issue. I'm glad that it was brought to light, but to act like there wasn't some media heads and there wasn't some doctors that actually got a decent payday from kind of pushing CTE out there more into the mental makeup of America is something that we can't completely dismiss.
Yeah, that and the science truly isn't explored enough just yet. They don't know how to distinguish it in living people. You can only diagnose it after death when you biopsy the brain. I feel like once we get a little bit more brain evidence coming forward that they can study, a little bit more evidence on real life subjects, which sounds bad when you call them subjects, but real life people that enter a study or something like that, then we can get into trying to help treat it if it is treatable. So I feel like right now it's still just too early. Did it play a role? Sure, but I feel like all of this, except for really the sexuality thing, I really don't feel like that really played a role in the Odin Lloyd case, even though somebody tried to put out there saying that, Odin Lloyd saw that he was doing something with a certain person that he shouldn't have been, and that's why he killed him. So it's like, really, like, it's all hearsay. Nobody really knows exactly why he did it, but I just feel like the sexuality thing was pushed a little too hard in this.
I'm going to make my final highlights from episode 3 before we get into like the actual just reviewing the series in terms of like what we're going to give it as far as a rating. So before I do that, do you have a final highlight from this episode that you want to mention?
Not really. I wish they would have kind of explored the other guy. Drawing a blank on his name right now, but it was the guy that got shot in the face.
Oh, okay. You're talking about the guy that derailed that second trial.
I wish they would have pushed into him a little bit more. Like they touched base on him in I think it was episode 2, very little bit here, but they really dove into the other 2 guys that were with him during the Odin Lloyd case. And then the second case, they were just like, yeah, here's this guy. We think he might have done it.
The name on that, I would call him gentleman, but person involved in this, his name is Alexander Bradley. He's the one that, if you watch the show, got shot in the face or allegedly got shot in the face by Aaron Hernandez, former drug kingpin, kind of a shady dude himself. Okay, some final highlights that I kind of wanted to mention. This abatement thing. So it's interesting because we don't think of Aaron Hernandez necessarily as someone that was rationally minded, clearly by how poorly he covered up the crime scene of the Odin Lloyd murder. So it's interesting that he would know about this old law that's just been hanging around on the books for years, where he could have got his murder charges waived by dying in a prison, which would have set up his family. I should note that eventually got fixed or reversed in 2019 when they scrubbed that law from the books, making Aaron Hernandez officially a convicted murderer again. But it brought me to my next point. When hearing that, I was impressed by Odin Lloyd's mother throughout this episode, because for her to have the mental fortitude to forgive her son's killers, I don't think that's something that a lot of parents or family members or anyone could really do. But I mean, that's hard. That's tough. I don't think you can really.
It is hard, but I've heard people talk about, you don't forgive the person for that person. You forgive that person for yourself. If you carry around that hate, that vile feeling towards a certain person throughout your life, it kind of derails your health and everything like that. So you just forgive that person, you forget that person, and you just focus on your family member. I've heard that as a talking point to why you should forgive somebody. You never have to accept what they did or be okay with it, but you forgive them so you can move past it. You can go on with your day-to-day life. You can, finally just focus on your family member and celebrate their life instead of mourning their life.
With that, I think it's time to get into our official ratings for the series as a whole. Just to kind of recap our listeners, is this for your first time to the channel, or you've never watched some of our Get Your Popcorn series, which we review sports movies, sports documentaries such as this one. Basic 5-star rating system, except we have different ranks for that. So a 5-star, for example, would be a home run. 4-star would be warning track power. 3, Texas leaguer, base hit, something simple like middle of the road. 2, foul tip, okay, we probably won't remember it because it was inconsequential. And then, of course, a 1, lowest rating positive give, a strikeout, a complete swing and a miss. Now, there was some positive things in this documentary. Want to give your rating first, Harris, before I go in on this?
Yeah, I'll give it like a 2.5. Like it didn't seem well done. It seemed more of like I said the last episode, hey, here's Aaron, here's the kitchen sink. Let's just throw that at him. Let's kind of go on this exposure of the ruling being thrown out and him being back to being considered a convicted felon, convicted murderer. There was some good parts to it, but I felt like a lot of it was just not needed. So I'm going to give it a 2.5.
Okay, so between a foul tip, between a single, it just kind of rolled down the line for you a little bit and then just kind of veered out. Okay, that's fair. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give it just a straight up to a foul tip because it just missed like being something that I'd remember or be something that I want to necessarily remember. Just this weird infusion of narratives that I felt like didn't necessarily need to be pushed. There was like even like a Reefer Madness segment to all 3 episodes where they try to say, oh, he's smoking weed every day. This must have been like part of his mental makeup. Or obviously we mentioned that, well, I do think if there is any legitimate proof that he had questions about his sexuality, I think that maybe had some merit. I felt like them pushing it as the main thing without any proof, only the word of essentially one guy and some rumors that were pushed out there on a Shock Talk radio show, I felt diminished from the credibility of this documentary. And I felt like they didn't give enough thought process to some of the bigger narratives that have been put out there that did have some scientific like legitimacy, like the CTE stuff that we mentioned, because we saw pictures of this guy's brain and we still didn't get that push. So that's kind of how I feel about it. In terms of like, would I rewatch it? Maybe just kind of like get more perspective, but I don't feel like this is one that I necessarily have to rewatch. It's not like something that is going to be like, oh yeah, you got to see this Aaron Hernandez documentary.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a big problem for Netflix because they do true crime pretty well. They're up there with like the ID channel that does nothing but true crime. So I feel like they do put out some good true crime. My sister's a huge fan of true crime. That's all she watches. So Netflix, I know, does some really good true crime. And this one just,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's weird that we as a society have such a fascination with serial killers, murderers. I mean, that Ted Bundy documentary they did like year back, like blew up. Making a Murderer for them was a couple years back, was another hit series.
Was The Staircase on Netflix or was
The
that
Staircase was on Netflix? Yeah. So you're right. They do great in this particular genre, but I feel like if they really wanted to make this documentary last, they should have focused mostly on the stuff that we can prove and leave the speculation and rumors, push those to the side. Either way, guys, I mean, we hope you enjoyed the series. If you have any thoughts or your own input, definitely throw those in the comments section. We'd like to hear back from our listeners in regards to it. Did you like the documentary? Let us know. We want to know ourselves.
Let us know what you guys think the actual biggest contributor to this was as well down in the comment section.
Exactly. We'll reply back too. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Either way, guys, like, comment, subscribe to the Slump Buster Podcast at Slump Buster Podcast on Instagram. Great follow for you guys. Find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We do this show, Get Your Popcorn Review, like I said, series, movies, all things sports related. And then we got a pretty fantastic podcast. Harris will be back in the fall season to discuss fantasy football. Either way, you guys have a good one. We'll see you next episode.
See you guys.